General Hughes, distinguished guests, veterans, friends, and snooks. I'm honored and humbled to be here today, speaking to you about remembering our nation's heroes who died in the defense of our country. Though there are volumes that could be said, I'll talk about just three: the origin of Memorial Day, commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War, and what we owe those who we are remembering. Today is a day that we as a nation remember and honor those heroes whose lives was sacrificed for what they believed was in the best interest of our great nation. Notice I didn't say they gave their lives for our great nation. I said they sacrificed their lives, because they just didn't give up and die. They fought for their lives as hard as they could, and they fought for their beliefs and how they believed the nation should be. Now, many confuse Memorial Day with Veterans Day. The distinction is easy. Today is Memorial Day, and we celebrate our war dead. On Veterans Day, we remember all who have fought, both living and dead. And on Armed Forces Day, we celebrate those who are currently serving. Now, the origins of honoring the war dead in the U.S. began around the time of the Civil War, a time when brother fought brother for what side they believed was right. And both Confederate and Union soldiers were honored then, as we do today. All across the nation, in most every town and municipality, among all of the holiday sales, picnics, parties, and recreation activities, there are parades and ceremonies honoring and remembering our war dead. Now, as I set upon to compose this talk, I thought it would be easy. Heck, I stood in so many formations or sat in the bleachers or marched in a parade where someone stood up and talked about the women of some town around the time of the Civil War who went to the cemetery and decorated the graves of the blue and gray soldiers buried there. Thus the beginning of Decoration Day. But this time, because I suppose of the power of the internet, I Googled and was surprised to find that there's much disagreement as to the exact time, date, and location of the first celebration. One claim is made for Columbus, Mississippi, for it's reported that on April 25th, 1866, when ladies were decorating the graves of the Confederate dead, they looked at the unkept graves of the Union soldiers and went over and placed flowers on them also. Macon in Columbus, Georgia also lay claim to be the first. I've also read where on May 1st, 1865, a group of some 10,000 freed black men and women gathered in Hampton Park in Charleston, South Carolina, and placed flowers on the graves of the unknown soldiers who were buried there. Others trace it back to May 5th, 1868, and General John Logan, the national commander of the Grand Army of the Republic, when he issued his General Order Number 11, designating May 30th as a time for strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion. Interestingly, Logan chose May 30th because it was not the anniversary of any particular battle. Thus, it was for all dead from all battles. In any case, Decoration Day was celebrated as a Civil War event until shortly after World War I, when the intent was expanded to include all of the heroes who died in the Civil War and World War I. After World War II, the name was changed to Memorial Day and included all soldiers of all wars. In 1965, the Centennial Research Committee had shown that Waterloo, New York, had the first formal, complete, village-wide annual observance of the day dedicated to the war dead. And on May 26, 1966, President Lyndon B. Johnson, at the urging of the New York delegation and the U.S. Congress, officially proclaimed Waterloo, New York, as the birthplace of Memorial Day. Now, the argument continues today among some of the locales about who truly was the first. To me, who started it, where it started, or when it started is immaterial. What is important is that those who sacrificed their lives in war were being remembered, and that remembrance continues with us here today. So much for the history lesson. This year, the nation is commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. That's one of the reasons I was asked to speak today. I'm a veteran of the Vietnam War. I served 2 tours there. The first flying Hueys with Bravo Troop 1st Squadron 9th Cavalry, the reconnaissance element of the 1st Air Cavalry Division, in April '67 to April '68. and again in August 69 to August 70, this time flying twin-engine fixed-wing aircraft on classified missions for the security agency. Today, I join with you remembering all of our nation's war dead, and remembering especially those who we knew and served with. My list begins with my flight school classmates, where 13 of them made the sacrifice. Griff Bedworth, Ralph Brown, Hap Rose, Bob Daly, Freddie Elizondo, George Gray, Bill Jacobus, Johnson Milligan, Tom Moore, Charlie Osterman, and Dave Tim, as well as Raina Ramus and Floyd Strange, whose bodies were not recovered. 13 in all. I add to that list my 6 classmates that died during training in the run-up to Vietnam. My list goes on to include my comrades in Bravo Troop, who I served with, flew with, or carried them into and out of some very hot places almost daily. Jim Godfrey, Freddie McMurray, Gary Hanna, Lou Perazzo, Otto Siemens, Dawson Burnham, Jimmy Chrysler, and many others. These are among the 58,272 names currently on the wall. And then I remember the KIAs I extracted while their units continued to fight on. I can still see the bodies in the back of my Huey, and some of the faces of them as their comrades carried them to the aircraft. Let's pause for a moment as you call to mind your list to remember. Too many others I know who are KIA. Some who I just only met or saw the evening before, or at the mess tent at breakfast the day they were killed. Didn't really know their names or anything about them, and that makes me very sad. It's tough to walk the wall searching to see if their name would jump back at me. Last year, the traveling wall visited us here in Radcliffe. I spent some time there at the wall. I walked from panel 18E to panel 47E. These are the panels that contain the names of all who died in Vietnam during my first Vietnam tour. 29 panels in all, and not the short panels towards the end of the walls. No, these are the tall panels, names upon names of heroes. As I reflected on these names, I thought of the families who grieve, the parents, spouses, and kids who never knew them, or were too small to remember any real specifics, and I said a prayer for them. And as I looked at the rest of the wall, the enormity of the individual suffering it represents hit me. Today we honor these heroes, and in doing so we also honor those most affected by the sacrifice, their families. Also affected even to this day are the many thousands of us still living who served alongside of these heroes. We know, we who looked into the eyes of the tiger, know that while they died in the defense of our nation's cause, we know they stayed and fought to the end because of us. The guy next to them in a rice paddy, in their squad or platoon, or the guy in the back of the aircraft. And we suffer their loss today. A little while ago, I was at a veterans event somewhere, and I overheard one vet ask another one, "Hey, when were you in Vietnam?" The other one looked at him and said, casually, "Last night." To say Vietnam had an effect on us is an understatement. We must reach out to them and each other, and listen and help as we can, and demand our government live up to their side of the bargain and provide at least adequate health care for them, though they deserve and have earned so much more than just adequate health care. So we've talked about the origins of Memorial Day. We talked about commemorating the 50th anniversary of Vietnam, and now we need to talk about what we owe those who we are remembering. What is our obligation to them? I believe we have an obligation to tell their story for them, to not let their lives and sacrifices be forgotten. We need to be available to the spouses, the children, and the family of those who died, to tell them as much as possible about our buddy, our comrade. What was he like? What do you remember about him? What did you do for fun? Are there any personal stories you know about him? And if we didn't know them personally, what were your experiences that might shed some light on how their loved one might have lived or experienced? I wrote a book about my first tour in Vietnam and how I got in the Army. I talk about soldier stuff, living in a tent, the 5-gallon showers, the 1 and 2 holers back in base camp, those basic things we all experienced. And I wrote of the heroics of the Bravo troopers. I wrote the book to not forget the things the heroes I served with did. Now, over the years since it was published, I am humbled by what effect it has had on them in understanding a bit more about Vietnam, and how after reading the book, many of the families tell me their loved one opened up just a little bit more about their experiences in Vietnam. I also believe our obligation to our fallen brothers is to live our lives to the absolute maximum, going all out to do the things that they may have liked to do and do it in their place. And we need to ensure that our future soldiers are not treated as some of us were on our return home. We must continue to fight for these new heroes. And so today, let us remember, let us honor, let us salute, and lay decorations on their graves and say a prayer for all those who sacrificed their lives for this great nation of ours. We must never forget their sacrifices. Thank you all, and may God bless our dead, our veterans, our serving military, and all of their families. God bless you all.